Hey guys, welcome to part 5 of my Unity chain simulation video series. Today, we're modeling the wooden posts at the edge of the trail, which later we're going to be adding collision to make the chains arch down from them. And this time I really don't have anything unique to say other than let's get started. Although that sort of is. One thing I've found as well is it's not really that responsive when you try to scroll in and out or zoom in and out of the scene view or do anything really related to the game. And in fact, one of the features of the chain cloning script, that was a test, let me just delete these ones. Oh wait, one is that the starting chain? No, oh, this one is the starting chain. One feature as well is this iterations value here. So this is an integer value that you can set to, maybe let's try something like 25. And let's just maybe create like a curve, set the world rotation to 5. And as you can see here, we don't have the execute rate. I guess maybe it's defaulted to 0.1. However, it does not really look like it's iterating or look as though it's iterating between every tenth of a second, which is what this is. So it's not really exactly as responsive. This is just 25 chains and a quad, and even still, you can really see it's kind of choppy here. And again, Unity is it's made for games, and many games probably a lot of games have more physics than this, and a lot more intensive graphics as well, and a lot of other stuff. So what we can do, one thing that I've noticed actually that kind of hogs this, that definitely is a performance hit, is the graphics engine, I guess, setting under your project settings. So to change this, we can go to Edit, Project Settings, and then Player. I thought for a minute it was graphics, but I think it's Player. So Player, you can see here, if you see metal, if you notice this thing at the end here, it says in kind of greater than, less than marks. It just says here metal in this last word here. And that's because we have the metal editor support checkbox on. So I think this might be something to do with Apple, graphics acceleration. Apple's mentioned metal graphics acceleration in I think some article on 32-bit apps that they've published maybe. So what we're going to do is to uncheck this, and what is going to change is the editor graphics device. The Active Graphics API requires reloading all graphics objects, and it might take a while. So we're going to hit apply, and scenes have been modified. So it's asking us to save the scene. Of course, we want to save the scene because we just made changes to it. And you might notice that the editor becomes a slight bit lighter here, and I mean, maybe, I don't know. You can see it's a lot more responsive when we're zooming in and out of the scene. It was definitely a lot faster last time I tried to do this. I mean, I did actually redo the project because I actually did this whole thing up to the point where I did the environment, the terrain, and editing the terrain was definitely pretty slow, a lot slower than last time. I've definitely learned something here. So make sure it says metal here and you have problems and you're on macOS especially, I guess. It might just have to do with that. Definitely try unchecking metal editor support. So now, I don't know, let's just test this as it is. Change. Oh, it's frozen. So all of these positions are frozen. So we want all of them except the one not frozen, so they can move, but this one can't, and it's going to be the one they're kind of swinging from, I guess, if that makes sense. The chain is kind of tied to that point. It's kind of a pivot point, I guess. So, editor graphics device. Maybe it's just has to do with the editor, but definitely I've noticed that. Also, I've definitely also noticed that when you select the maximize on play option, it becomes significantly faster. I've noticed that with when it was set to OpenGL, probably set to OpenGL when I was doing this before. However, I noticed that it definitely was significantly, maybe more significantly, faster when the maximize on play was checked. Maybe it's using OpenGL or something like in the game view. Maybe the scene view is using a more intensive graphics device. I don't know. GL stands for Graphics Library, I think, by the way. The thing that we're going to do next is to model these kind of wooden posts that I made in the final image. So there are these wooden things, like these wooden rectangular, like sort of sticks, I guess, these posts. They look like they were implanted into the ground, and I put them on the side of the trail, put the chains through the holes. So we're going to make that thing. So what we're going to do, in this Pro Builder window, select New Shape, and we're going to choose Cube, which is the default shape. And we're going to set the size to something like maybe, okay, so it's not really the best size, maybe top isometric mode, and maybe move this so we can see it better relative to the chains. So we want to see this relative to the chains so we can kind of see what's optimal and what's not. So I think maybe about 0.5. I want to set maybe the Z to 0.5 as well. Good values to use with like relative to these chains. So maybe 0.6 actually. I just try to set the y-axis, maybe just default to 0 or something. 0.01 is not what we want. We can choose maybe something like 3 and see how that looks. Let me go back to perspective mode. And this is maybe a bit short actually, so maybe 4 or 5, I think. That might actually be good. We can scale it up a bit if it looks like not how we want to us. Build cube, and again, will also allow us to edit the mesh. One thing that we don't want is an unused face. So we're going to be having this underside here against, just right up against the ground probably all the time. We definitely do not want this face on here. In face mode here, select this and so hit the delete key. Subtract that from our geometry. Now we're going to make the hole in the side of this. So what we're going to do for this, create another shape, and we're going to choose cylinder as the shape for this. And you might be thinking, well, how are we going to cut a hole in it by creating another object? Shouldn't we just use like some of the modeling features to like make the hole? We're actually going to be using the cylinder to cut a hole in it. More on that in a moment. So number of size, something like maybe 12, I guess. And as for the height, 5 for just a bit more leeway. And the radius, 0.3, I guess. Okay, just hit build. We can scale it later. And now rotate this on, I guess, the z-axis by 90 degrees. So what we're going to do to prepare for this is place it where we want to cut a cylindrical hole through this mesh, which is what we're going to do in a minute. I'll show you the way that we're going to do that in a minute. And the transform handles aren't really doing anything. Oh, it's static. So definitely check whether it's static if the transform handles are not doing anything. Uncheck that. Nothing. Have the nothing box checked. Oh, I just noticed we're in face mode in Pro Builder. So we have this object selected, but it'll move any faces you have selected instead of the entire object, the cylinder object. You have anything selected, it'll move that, and because we don't have anything selected, any of these faces selected, presumably, well, it's not moving the cylinder. That's weird. So what we're going to do is to place it where we want it to cut through, essentially. In, like, basically where we want it to drill through when we do that. And definitely the scale can be put down as well. Maybe put maybe about there. Scale it 0.5 and 0.5, 0.5. Oh, we rotated, maybe it's the local. Oh, it's definitely the local scale to get it to something that seems like, so we're going to, actually I might want to just go into side view and go into isometric mode and maybe just hit F to focus on this in the scene, and that kind of resets our isometric camera position here. This seems like it might be a bit lower than we want to because we want to have kind of a bit of leeway for the chains to go into. and maybe we can adjust the height. So because of this parallel projection mode, it kind of allows us to view everything from the side here, kind of how an architect would model like a house or a building or something. So this seems like a good position, and scale to 6 to like 0.6 for everything. This looks like it might be ideal. So now what we're going to do, like I said, is to cut a hole, the cube, a cylindrical hole using the object. So what we're going to do for that is to go to the menu bar at the top left of the screen and choose Tools, Pro Builder, Experimental, so this is an experimental feature, Boolean, CSG tool. So CSG, I believe, stands for Constructive Solid Geometry. So what this allows us to do is it allows us to kind of cut holes in things and perform different operations you can set here. And the one that we want to set is subtraction, and this is going to drill the hole, set the object that we want to cut a hole in or modify with the object that used to modify the first object as a ladder. So the first one is so drag this into this space or into this slot, and it will assign this here. The cylinder is the one that we want to use to modify the cube object. So drag the object that you want to modify using the Boolean tool into the first slot, drag the one to use to modify it that you want to drill the hole into it with, in this case, into the right slot. So now, once we have all of this set, we can hit apply. It's going to create a new game object and put it in the same position. So it might not be apparent what it's just done, but the new game object is the final object that we want. Maybe close this window. We don't want it open anymore. So now you can see here, you can already notice here that it's created a hole. And in fact, if you see here, the background is gray. You can see that gray through this hole. Rotate down, you can see that the sort of horizon of the quad that we made, the ground, the placeholder ground, once it reaches beyond the hole or through it, you can see that it's white through it. So you can see that we've made a hole in this object, which is a cool thing. However, I mean, this face here, you can see here that this definitely more polygons than, I guess that's why this is an experimental feature. I guess maybe they might refine it in like Unity 2019, which I'm definitely excited for that because they are definitely pacing forward with some of their new features.